Hey everyone. As Rajan said, we are between you and a glass of wine. So we'll try and be entertaining. So you promised to sing, right? Malik is a good singer. So, and some of us will tell jokes. So the theme of the conference, of course, you all heard several times, is reimagining infrastructure in a distributed era. And interestingly, it was very interesting to hear the keynote from Kisbedi and also the fireside chats emphasize different aspects of it from different angles. And this panel, you can think of it as like double-clicking one level into that. To that extent, we will have different folks on the panel addressing different aspects of this. Malik from Ericsson is going to address the infrastructure aspects. And then we have Professor Evans, who is going to address apps and use cases. And then we have Debo, who is going to address AI, ML aspects. And then we have Kapi, who is going to address, I talked about the distributed trust and blockchain. He's going to talk about that. And then we will have, I think, spirited conversation. I expect to have some arm wrestling. No.
Without
Okay.
the spirit.
We are waiting for the spirit. Is that what you said? Okay. So we'll get to that soon. So what I would like to do is first go around the panel and just have like 15 seconds, introduce yourself, and we'll then go through the setup. Please, Malik.
Thank you, Prabhakar. My name is Malik Taripamla. I'm CTO of Ericsson Silicon Valley. My job is essentially connecting the dots, connecting technologies and architectures to realize that distributed era for 5G networks. Yeah, how all the technologies, AI, machine learning, IoT, SDN and FE, edge compute, and 5G, all of them are coming together to realize the distributed era. So that's my job function.
Excellent, excellent. Professor
What a
Evans?
great job function. Huh? It's like, well, my name is Stuart Evans. I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon in the Engineering College. I also run an innovation lab at Emirates Airline, and I'm on the technical advisory board of Infineon. So I teach classes in mainly the software engineers and computer scientists, but I spend a lot of time in the CIO environment because we talked a lot about digital transformation. I think that many companies have realized that it's what CIOs have been doing all the time anyway, and it's good to give back to them and let them get on with the job that they know how to do best. But I do think we're at an inflection point now. Infineon had an October tech event down at the Computer History Museum today, and they just showed how the new Nexus 4 has their radar sensor in it, which can look at gestures and interact differently. And all their IoT devices have got security on them, and it's really kind of moving into a different realm. So I think with what Malik's doing, we're really on the sort of verge of a very different era coming about. And I think that the cloud, mobile, social analytics kind of innovation wave, we're about to be replaced with another one.
It would be great hearing from you about some of these use cases that you just mentioned. So, Debo?
Hi, I'm Debo Datta. I'm a distinguished engineer at Cisco, been Cisco for a bit. And in my current incarnation, like I've had many lives, but in my current life,
This is your seventh?
I have to count. Nth. In this current life, I lead a bunch of AI ML projects and initiatives across the company, mostly in infrastructure. Some of the things that we do are all in open source. If you look at Kubeflow, we were one of the early investors along with Google in Kubeflow. We've spent a lot of time working with AI chip companies and benchmarking and defining what the applications should be in ML perf. So these are some of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis, plus a bunch of supporting other businesses for AI ML technologies.
Thanks, Debo. Kapi, can you?
Thank you. I feel slightly like the odd one out here because I'm the only blockchain guy on the panel.
Oh, it fits the theme perfectly.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
So I'm responsible for the North America business for blockchain for Samsung. Most people, can you hear? No. So my wife usually tells me I talk very loud, but I guess not. Basically, we've had a lot of success in Asia until last year. And so I've basically started to build a business in North America to bring the successes we've had in Asia over to this side of the Pacific. And we've had quite a lot of success in terms of enterprise blockchain, which is what we focus on. By the way, how many people here have a Samsung S10? A couple? Well, you're the proud owners of a crypto wallet and a key store,
Nice, nice.
right? Because that's going to come with all our new phones and new devices, including the Note.
Excellent, excellent. So great, thanks for the introduction. What I would like to have is have Malik kick off set the context, because he has been talking about this topic of distributed era at various places. So Malik, if you could make some comments, and then we'll get on with some discussion.
Thank you, Prabhakar. Yep, certainly. So, first of all, it's my honor to be here. I happen to see my friends Kanaya, Klaus, Rajiv, and Saumanji after a long time. So, thanks, Prabhakar. Thanks for inviting me to be here. So, I get a chance to talk to CTOs around the world, as well as a part of our job function, we get to work with professors from CMU, UC Berkeley on this subject. Yeah. So, I just wanted to give a quick paint about how the world is moving towards distributed era based on our discussions with the faculty members as well as CTOs. So let's talk about, many of you already know the past 10 years, the apps moved from on-prem to cloud. So that's how, we realized the centralized cloud. That's how things move towards hyper-converged infrastructure and so on and so forth. So that's a classic data consumer world where you have enterprise apps such as CRM, SAP type of apps moving from on-prem to a central cloud. But the next one is going to be driven by compute moving closer to the data sources, or compute moving closer to the workloads. So that's where the central distributed cloud comes in. And that's mainly driven by ultra-low latency applications. How many of you have seen the latency on current public cloud infrastructure? It's measured on the website. Within Western region itself, it's about 150 milliseconds. Just look about round trip time from your device to the applications and back. If you count it, you are getting about 600 to 700 milliseconds. You see? So that's where the low latency makes sense for certain applications. So given that, how the infra is evolving, it all starts with applications, right? Applications move from monolithic to centralized microservices to distributed microservices. Over the last 30 years of my experience, I've seen how the world moved from 2G to 5G, and correspondingly how upper layer infrastructure moved. Yeah. So the applications are driving. If you go back to Prabhakar, if you go back to the previous one, applications are driving the change in the rest of the infrastructure: connectivity, compute, control/intelligence due to machine learning. So they're all coming together, as you can see, to realize the distributed era, to drive that the next decentralized cloud or distributed cloud driven by ultra low latency applications. So how do you put all these pieces together? How does 5G and rest of the pieces come together? So the 5G being low latency, everyone talked about 5G offering ultra low latency, right? So 5G with SD and NFV creating that virtual slices to accommodate IoT verticals through network slicing. Then on top of that, you have compute infrastructure to process the workloads locally for mission critical IoT applications. Then do the local inference for decision making or user experience. At the same time, extending that ML to do the network automation and optimization. So whenever someone speaks, this is so interesting. When I talk to networking guys, they talk about ultra low latency only in the context of networking. Everything else is given for them. When I talk to compute guys, they talk about compute from ultra low latency perspective, everything else is given. But if you really look at it, ultra low latency can only be realized by having entire stack, high-speed connectivity such as 5G, faster processing through edge compute, and then faster ML algorithms to do the almost real-time edge inference. Then only you can realize ultra-low latency. Otherwise, it becomes as good as the weakest link in that particular stack. So that essentially results into 10 years from now, you see multiple clouds. Enterprise cloud, industrial cloud, telco cloud, public cloud. How do you do workload migration between these clouds? Still realize that ultra-low latency. How can you provide as SLA guarantees while you're moving workloads from one cloud to another? You see? So there are lots of interesting challenges that exist between the gaps or technology intersections between that stack. So I think that's why when Prabhakar invited me, I jumped up, because this is where this panel is going to talk about, what sort of opportunities and challenges exist if we had to move towards that distributed era, from centralized, what we have seen for the last 10 years.
That's a fantastic setup, Malik. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So that kind of triggers, Professor Evans, if you can comment from your experience. You even mentioned Emirates. We had some discussion about tracking passengers through the hub, and people coming late and what problems it creates.
Absolutely.
If you can give us some real world context of this distributed era and what kind of infrastructure issues you are seeing, that would be fantastic.
Well, with Emirates particularly, they're obviously they have a big fleet of A380s, and we put a lot of people around the world in different times. And one of the things that happens, I don't know if, has anybody flown in Emirates in the audience here? Did you have a good flight?
All the time. All the time.
So, but when you get to Dubai, if you get there at the wrong time, there's flights come in the other direction, and everybody meets at the same time.
Right.
And so it can take you a couple of hours to get from one side to the other.
They
So-
have gold shops to take care of them.
Yeah, well, the duty-free shops there are pretty good too. But trying to manage those transitions from passengers coming through, getting them to the gate, getting them on the plane, getting all the baggage on the plane, all the cargo on the plane, all the meals on the plane. There's a lot of different things that work there. So, one of the things we've been looking at this last year is been using autonomous vehicles to get baggage and cargo and things worked through.
Oh, that's interesting.
We've been working with drones in the cargo warehouse.
Wow.
I had a student who sat through a course we did where we looked at cargo as a service. And one of the guys from Emirates gave this story about how it kept him up at night when he saw his folks standing on the edge of forklift trucks trying to see in the bins. So Sankalp kept this in his head. He came, we did a hackathon, and then he went down to Dubai and he built out a solution with drones. And they do now in 15 minutes what it took 2 days to do
Wow.
before. So that's a
impressive.
combination of vision and thermal imaging. We do a lot of pharmaceutical delivery, so ensuring that the integrity of cargo is a big thing. But I think there's a lot of different opportunities around, and I think what Malik was talking about is really indicative of not a paradigm shift, but it's like many things coming together that we've been wanting to do for a long time, like machine learning and areas like that. And one of the things that I see happening for CIOs is this digital transformation really has been a sort of an awakening of the rest of the organization, that you can do things with compute and with storage and with algorithms that really make a good business case. And I think what you're seeing happening now is probably very soon you're going to see micro data centers at the edge functioning in a different way. The debate between on-prem and cloud, I think, is pretty much is moving along.
Right.
And I think that there are a number of different ways to do things. So, if you look at what's going on in ML in the enterprise right now, probably the most effective company is MoveWorks. MoveWorks have a system that, if Chris is here, they use IT tickets and they can automate about 30% of them using natural language speech processing. But they also have a great product on Slack for onboarding. So when you're recruiting a couple hundred people a month, getting them all their Okta credentials, their laptops, their phones and things like that, used to take 7 or 8 emails in 10 days. Now it's one click. So I think there are certain things that are more on the RPA side of ML, which are highly valuable. there's a sort of high-hanging fruit of getting things really complex worked through. So I was at a medical equipment manufacturer the other day who provide the medications to the ICUs and for cancer treatments and things like that. And they have to mix like 12 different drugs in a cocktail and deliver it real time. Now, they're thinking about one of the things that we're doing with some of the students is mixing that information about how the patient reacts to that concoction and tweaking it by going back to a database of how similar patients have reacted and do real-time mixing of those compounds to get a better outcome.
When you said cocktails, I have something else in mind.
Well, I know it's hard to go in the last section when the bar's open. That's
My mind went off to no.
So I think that there's a lot of speculation about what might happen, but I think now we're going to see the convergence of the 5G network allowing the sort of interactions that you can have, the IoT networks with off-the-shelf sensors, the devices that are making, and then the software to pull it all together, the intelligence to pull it all together, the apps.
Distributed apps.
And it's, sorry.
Yeah, so I would like to get Debo, your perspective on what you heard from Malik and Professor Evans. We will come to the AIML topic itself next, but I just wanted to get a reaction.
So from what I heard from both of them, I think it's extremely important to figure out where your data is and where where's your workload and what do you want to do at that point in that workload and how do you want to manage that and how do you want to enable your digital transformation by stitching what happens along the pipeline.
Okay. That's very interesting. So, Kapi, I know that you are going to talk about blockchain later, but do you have any reaction to what you heard so far?
Yeah, I mean, people will all relate to connected cars. Most cars now have something like 70 ECUs on board. And most of the modern ones, most of them have got AI and ML built in. And the network slicing that Malik talked about is absolutely critical, especially for safety-related
fast
incidents.
turnaround times.
So the actual composition of the ECUs is changing from what we had before to the modern world. And this is where all of this comes together, the blockchain, the edge computing, all of that stuff.
Excellent. Thanks for the comments. So going to Debo here. Debo, you had a fantastic catchphrase. I just loved it. You said, I think you even have an equation. I will let you describe it. So AI for infra and infra for AI. That was just awesome. So why don't you take it away?
So actually, if you look at the distributed infrastructure, the landscape that Malik just painted, I mean, AI is a buzzword and it's overused and there's a lot of pixie dust. But if you double click and remove the pixie dust, you'll see that there are essentially, if you want to accelerate your digital transformation in this new world, you need to be cognizant about two things. One is AI for infra and infra for AI. So if you want to run your operations in a very efficient way, you want to use AI to optimize your infra. And when I say infra, it's not just hardware. It's hardware, software, security, everything. Data. Actually, data is even more crazy if you want to just optimize that. And then if you want to, I mean, that's just getting your operational efficiency out of your own processes. But if you want to then accelerate, I mean, and not be left out in that transformation, you need to then figure out how would you run all these interesting AI ML applications by leveraging the distributed infrastructure that you're trying to either build or rent or co-locate with other capabilities. And that's basically infra for AI.
That could even be different pieces on purpose-built infrastructure.
Yes. So for example, I'll look at the AI for infra piece first. In the AI for infra bucket, what most people will think AI is the hard part. Actually, what's really hard is to figure out the data that you will feed into. So if you think about the AI as a black box, you can actually do a lot of transfer learning and you can leverage, in simple terms, you can leverage existing AI. You don't have to reinvent new science. What you have to do is do a lot of engineering and productization of the fact that you need to have diverse data from all the way from edge to your cloud in order to make a inference or basically take a decision. And data has to be normalized. And that's the hardest problem in AI for infra. And so essentially it's consistent data, consistent data operations, consistent, and then and once you have that under control, then you can leverage. Actually, the AI piece is not that hard. The other thing in that bucket is we only think about machine learning, but we may want to start thinking about machine learning and reasoning, because when you look at a baby, a newborn, the baby hasn't seen millions of images of cats and dogs, or millions of images of cold objects and hot objects. They haven't.
They see it on YouTube
They
later.
can figure out M&Ms pretty quick too, can't they?
Yeah, they can figure out M&Ms.
Can I make a point on this? Because I think
Please
it's
do,
really
please do.
important. When you look at ML in practice, the solutions that they generate, assuming you got a good data set,
Yeah.
because I think that's like 80% of the problem nowadays, is those solutions are fragile. They're not like one-off and perfect forever. You've got to tweak them all the time. And so the data scientists that you have need to be able, just like a child adapts once it's had 4 or 5 M&Ms, it realizes
what
maybe
to
I've
do.
had too much and maybe I need to... That
They can never
ability
have
to
enough.
adapt is going to be key in the deployment of AI and ML.
Right.
It's really easy.
Yeah, so I think that's not been a big push in the industry. So I think reasoning is going to be very important.
This is actually very interesting because you mentioned data as a key component, and data comes in all kinds of forms, and it may be a good segue to talk about data in blockchain form and how that is going to apply in this world. Kapil?
You'd asked me to differentiate between distributed data and decentralized.
Uh-huh.
And I think a simple way to look at it is decentralized means it's distributed data with a consensus model. And one of the great things about having a decentralized data system is that you can instantaneously provide information to everybody in a relevant node, irrespective of where they are. So, talking about your thing to do with AI and ML, is that you can instantly trigger an action from either a machine or a person who needs to take action, especially in safety-related issues, as I was talking about in connected car, which is why AI is becoming so important inside the car. But there are so many other examples. I mean, track and trace and logistics and all these other things. There's so much learning that can be done. It's interesting you were talking about the Emirates. If you go to any airport, most of the dollies that transport your baggage and all the other things, they're run by contractors. And every airport has hundreds and hundreds of contractors who run these things. Nobody knows where anything is. And a lot of the delays are caused by the fact that nobody knows where their particular dolly or trolley or truck is. And so one of the reasons they don't know is people are careless. They just leave it once they finish a job. But the second thing is there is no instant connectivity between the different contractors and the main owners of the systems.
Or even trust amongst
There's
them,
no
right?
trust, there's no data sharing, there's nothing.
And they do a lot of damage. It's like $7
They
billion damage
Yeah,
a
yeah.
year to the undercarriages of the planes.
Yeah, that's, but also they're responsible for a lot of fines that, the cargo carriers like FedEx and UPS and all these guys incur because they don't know what's going on. So blockchain is one of these great technologies. You hear a lot of stories about how it's not scalable and so on. And in the Bitcoin world, and if you're mining for Ether and stuff, it's absolutely true. But in the enterprise world, it's actually becoming much less of an issue. And the instantaneous sharing of data is becoming actually the thing that is enabling these other technologies that you're hearing about in terms of AI, ML, network slicing, and all the other bits that pull it all together. I liked one of the speakers earlier who talked about, there's no just one leg to the stool. All these things come together.
Absolutely.
You're only as good as the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just said that, Malik. But I think that's really absolutely true in all
Weakest
of
link
this.
in the blockchain.
In any chain. Whether it's a communication chain, if it's a communication chain, infrastructure, cloud, whatever it might be, if you have a weakness in that chain, it's going to impact everything you do. So you really need to think through all of that.
Excellent. So I think we have heard from the panelists. I think that kind of like concludes the phase one. So If any of the audience have questions for any of the panelists, please ask, and then we will wrap up. That may be a question for Malik first. So, go ahead, Malik.
In fact, that we are looking at the interworking between private and public, both LTE as well as 5G. That is still in the early stages of how do you do seamless session, what do you call a handoff between private and public places, and still maintain some security SLAs and so on.
So, Professor Evans, have you seen application of this type of hybrid type deployments?
Yes, I think what's really happening on our campus down at Moffett Field, we have a converted ambulance that can create a mesh that's 2 miles in diameter, and we connect lots of different devices. We have a drone tethered that can go up to the cloud, and that can work with a number of devices. It can work with sensors on individuals that are doing training exercises. It can work on computer vision for looking for certain things. So how you integrate them is important. I think for the enterprise, though, I imagine that many people sort of see 5G and they think, oh, this is a great thing. Is it an upgrade from what we've got already? And it's not. It's something quite different. And I think the first instance we're going to see, to answer your question about the public-private thing, is that I think enterprise is going to put their own private meshes in place to connect all these devices together, which will be secure because it's their own and it's software defined. And I think this is the biggest transition that's going to come about when we move to 5G, is that it's all software defined. The telecommunications network is going to actually be in the cloud itself, and people can program their own. So you're going to find a proliferation of new applications that was kind of akin to like when the App Store came out with it for the phone, or when the PC came out and you could start to do your own things.
So more new telecom type applications.
Absolutely. And you know, I'm not sure if the existing infrastructure in place is ready for it.
AR, VR is an example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to see we're going to see the rise of some new big companies coming through pretty quick.